And as I said, my abstinence date is May 24th, 2009. And since that date, I have weighed and measured 3 meals a day off the gray sheet. I've written them down, called them into my sponsor or another qualified person. I eat those meals. No matter what, I eat what I say I'm going to eat. I don't eat in between meals. It really is the most important thing in my life without exception. And it's really good to be here. I only get to this meeting every other week at best, and I really love it. So it's wonderful to be here. I write a lot. I write a lot about my disease, and I write a lot about trying to remember all the stuff in my life, because the step one tells us that, you know, we're powerless over food, and well, it doesn't say and, our lives have become unmanageable. And I realized fairly quickly into being in these programs that I was powerless over food, although I have to say that when I first heard the word powerless, I was really insulted. And I didn't understand what the word powerless meant, but I'm going to say more about that later. But my life being unmanageable, I didn't understand what that meant either. So I really have a lot of amnesia about this disease and how I have acted out. And so writing has been an incredible tool for me. So what's important for you guys to know, if you don't already, is that I believe I was born a food addict. I don't remember ever having a normal bite of food or a normal relationship with a bite of food. I ate over everything. I didn't know that I was doing that. I was a pretty unhappy child, and that was my solution to a lot of things, was eating. And but by the time I reached my teenage years, my problem had become that I'd gotten way overweight. And so I was looking for a solution. And I was told by my father, by many other people, that willpower, just have willpower. And so I tried willpower, and when I was 16, I actually lost a lot of weight using willpower, and the weight stayed off until it didn't, and it all came back on. And very quickly, willpower didn't work for me. And so my mother took me to doctor, and he prescribed appetite suppressant, which turned out to solve a lot of other problems also. I was able to study better and focus better. But the problem with drugs is they make you absolutely nutty crazy. And the more I used it, the more I needed it. And coming off of it, the nastier and uglier I got. And it was awful. My love affair with drugs lasted about 7 years, but it was a real roller coaster affair. So by the time I was in my 30s, I knew I had a problem that I was fat, and I knew I had all these other problems. I had a dysfunctional family. I couldn't seem to have a relationship. But my big problem was I was fat and I wanted to get thin. So I started the rounds like most people do of Weight Watchers. I think was my first diet I paid for. I got shots in my butt. I didn't staple my stomach. That's probably one of the few things I didn't do. And I discovered Overeaters Anonymous. So I went there, and what I realize now is that they presented me with a solution, which was the 12 steps, but they never told me what my problem was. I thought my problem was that I was fat, I had a dysfunctional family, and I couldn't work out relationships. And nobody told me differently. I heard from a few people that I had a disease, but I wasn't sure what the disease was, and I never asked. So fault was on both sides. And it wasn't until I went into Alcoholics Anonymous that I heard that I had a disease I had an allergy of the body. I couldn't take in sugar and grains in either hard form or liquid form. And I had an obsession of the mind. So I was learning why once I started binging, why I couldn't stop. But then they were also saying, this is why when you want to stop, you can't stop. And so willpower didn't work, Weight Watchers didn't work, all that, because when something would happen, that my solution was binging, and I didn't know any other solution. And I didn't know I had a disease. But now they were telling me what was the real problem, and all this other stuff was interesting. So by the time I found GreySheet, I initially found it in 1983 because my sister lived in Cambridge. But by the time I came crawling back on my hands and my knees, 26 and a half years later, GreySheet had really become, the food program that was just like AA. And people were talking about the same thing, that we have a disease. We have an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And I came in having that sense. I mean, everybody's read this in the big book, this utterly incomprehensible devastation. I thought it was hopeless. I thought I had a hopeless state of mind. And I was so scared. I didn't want to fail again at something. It was 26 and a half years is a long time. And for whatever reason, I mean, I had 4 day ones in GreySheet, but I never didn't call a sponsor first thing in the morning, and I never didn't weigh and measure my food. I ate food off the GreySheet, and I had technical mistakes. But on May 24th, I got down on my hands and knees, and I don't remember it, but I must have asked my higher power for help. And today I have, unbelievably, miraculously, what it says on step 10 in the big book. I am in that place of neutrality. I don't feel tempted. But you guys told me pretty clearly that if I wanted to stay abstinent, I was going to have to change a lot of behaviors, that if I didn't do that, if I kept doing the same old, I was probably going to go back to binging. And that had been my pattern. And so after, I think, about 2 years there were these meetings called Back to Basics that really all we did was talk about the food. And I didn't know how to cook. I'd only eaten out of boxes. I knew nothing. I didn't know how to set up a kitchen. I knew nothing about self-care and food. And I wanted to. I probably owned a lot of nutrition books. Who's timing? Who am I supposed to be looking at? Pat? Okay. Thanks. I wanted to. I just couldn't. I was incapable. I am a real food addict. I'm a real addict. So my very first sponsor actually came over to my kitchen, and she helped me set it up so that what I reached for was something that I would need that was GreySheet friendly. And we got rid of everything that I thought I needed when Architectural Digest came over to my house and took pictures. Of course, nobody had ever suggested that Architectural Digest was going to come to my house. I don't know why, but I had to get rid of a lot of stuff. And then after the 2 years, I started working the steps, and I knew they worked because I was in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I had tried to work the food because I was so ashamed of being such a failure with the food. I had tried to do it in AA, and it doesn't work. So I had to do the steps around the food. And the first thing I did was write out a timeline just from the day one. This is what I did when I was 2 years old, 5 years old. 5 more minutes, thank you. And then correspondingly, what was going on that was unmanageable. When I started stealing, when I started lying. I mean, everything I did was all about getting money, because money gave me power, and I had the power to go buy food. And when I was 10 years old, that was a lot of power because my parents didn't want me eating any sugar. So everything I did, everything I did was to hide, to not let people know how bad things were, and to get food. I would, I always laugh when people say we don't have willpower, because I would go to the ends of the earth to get food if you told me. And when college, there was this grocery store that used to put out food in the back of the grocery store. Supposedly this homeless shelter was going to come pick it up and give it to the homeless people. Well, I would get there first and get as much food as I could. And then because I'm such a nice person, I'd get some for other people too and pass it out in the dorm. So I was always doing things like that. That's stealing. I mean, I didn't think I was stealing. I thought I was being cool. And I stole a lot. I've had to make an enormous amount of amends around stealing. So basically, I got to the end of this timeline, and the progression of my disease was very obvious. I couldn't not see it. It was black and white. And I really, for the first time, understood what powerless meant. It didn't mean that I was weak, and it didn't mean I couldn't do a lot of things. It meant when it came to food, when it came to sugar and grains in liquid or hard form, for me, there was no way I could do anything about it with human help. I couldn't not eat or not drink, no matter how much I wanted to. And the second word that really pissed me off was when they said would restore me to sanity. And I thought, what, are you telling me I'm insane? There's no way I'm insane. I'm a professional woman. I'm this. I mean, I really had a lot to say to you guys when I first came in these rooms, because you had it all wrong. So I had to be explained a lot of things explained to me. And I was actually told often to keep the dictionary next to me when I was reading the big book. And if I didn't understand why a word was where it was, to ask someone, that it didn't always mean what I thought it meant. So I finally understood that when it came to sanity, I was insane around food. I would do the same thing over and over and over and over, no matter the fact that I got the same result every single time, and I didn't want that result. And yet I did the same thing over and over. That is a type of insanity. So I now, today, with some almost 10 years behind me with the food, I can say, and I'm so glad I didn't know how sick I was when I first came in. I'm just so glad I didn't. I was really, really sick. I was really, really arrogant. I was really sure I had all the answers, and I thought you guys were crazy. And here I am still, these many years later, and I've gone through the steps. I have slowly but surely admitted to all the things that I've done wrong. I have understood that admitting to a defect is really helpful to me, that I'm not a defect. I have defects. I've made mistakes. I'm not a mistake, no matter how much I thought I was when I was little. I can, 1 minute, thank you. I can say I'm sorry, but sorry's not good enough. I actually have to amend my ways, and I learned how to make amends by actually saying to people, and this is what I'm going to do differently with your help. And with very few exceptions, I've just gotten a lot of encouragement. In the last 3 years, almost everybody knows this, but I'll tell you anyway, I discovered this Back to Basics book, which set me on a whole new path of really improving my relationship with a higher power that has just been extraordinary. And I can't imagine today not sitting down and having a quiet time and listening for some guidance. Then I can imagine flying to the moon, and I would never have done that. I mean, what it's done is it's stopped the ping pong game in my head. I don't say, well, I wonder if, well, maybe this, well, maybe that. If it came in a sort of intuitive thought, I just stop. I don't question it. I do it. And I try to do, thank you, the next right thing. I've gotten much less lazy. I get up off my butt. I do a lot of service. which has proved very challenging for me. I make a lot of mistakes. I have a lot of opinions, and I have a big mouth, and I'm working on it. And so thank you very much for all being here, for being abstinent. I live in a place where there are no meetings, and these Zoom meetings are so wonderful, and so many of the same people are on them every week. You're like my family and my neighborhood. So I don't eat no matter what.